And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. We are brought to you by our good friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American, and you can take advantage of that right now with my promo code DEACE at firstcup.com. Promo code DEACE, firstcup.com. Promo code DEACE will get you a discount. They've got freshness as their bag, quite literally in this case. They put the roast on date right there in every bag and box and ship it to you so you can see how fresh it is when it arrives. Firstcup.com. Promo code DEACE is where you want to go. Firstcup.com. Promo code DEACE. All right, coming up on today's show. Idolatry or not, at the bottom of this hour, we've had a lot of conversation on this show about the church not going far enough for cultural/political engagement. So, I think it's only fair that at some point we ponder what is going too far. Right? What is going too far? So we'll get into that coming up at the bottom of the hour. All right. Next hour, we're going to be joined by Ruth Whippman, and she is the author of a brand new book, BoyMom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity. And what's fascinating about this is she is actually trying to reach a left-wing crowd with a message that we have to rescue the next generation of boys and young men. So that's a key component of this show, right? Trying to reach the current and next generation of men. Our show is specifically geared and targeted, not exclusively, I didn't say exclusively, but it is specifically targeted at the men, right?
Yes.
So is it possible there's common ground here? I don't know. I will tell you, I am skeptical. But Ruth, in good faith, has agreed to come on this show to have the conversation. So, we will be respectful of her and hear what she has to say. And I will ask some questions, and then you guys will get to decide whether or not you think that a national dialogue on this issue is possible here. All right. And then for Pop Culture Tuesday, we have a growing trend of female college athletes and programs refusing to compete against men. And now there's a new development in that trend. One of the universities is actually now pushing back on its own female athletes. All right. So we will discuss that and more coming up here in Pop Culture Tuesday towards the end of the show. But first, let's get it going as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by saying the quiet part out loud. On the campaign trail for Kamala, former President Bubba talked immigration and says if Kamala had done her job, Georgia nursing student Laken Riley would still be alive.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened.
He then proceeded to confirm that wild, paranoid, delusional right-wing conspiracy theory called the Great Replacement.
I don't think Americans are anti-immigration, they're anti-chaos. Right? They don't want us to do more than we can, but they recognize, at least most people do, we got the lowest birth rate we've had in well over 100 years. We're not at replacement level, which means we got to have somebody come here if we want to keep growing the economy.
Kamala is now accused of plagiarizing sections of her 2009 book, Smart on Crime, according to a new report by Dr. Stefan Weber, an Austrian plagiarism hunter. Harris and co-author Joan O.C. Hamilton had 27 fragments of plagiarism in the book Smart on Crime, a career prosecutor's plan to make us safer. In the 49-page report, Weber and his team also alleged that the Democratic presidential nominee and her co-author copied and pasted from a Wikipedia article for the book. Speaking in Minneapolis yesterday, GOP vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance reacted.
I saw today, actually, a story that Kamala Harris apparently copied some significant chunks of her book from Wikipedia. So if you want a president with their own ideas, vote for Donald Trump. If you want a president who copies her own ideas from Wikipedia, vote for Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, your thoughts?
There's this whole, I talked with somebody once who said, if you just look at where the stars are in the sky, don't look at them as just random things. If you just look at them as points, look at the constellation. What does it show you? So you just outlined it, Roland. What does it show you?
Gallup's party ID tracker now favors Democrats once more. 31% responding to that survey say they identify as Democrats, compared to 27% Republican and independents at 42%. Last month, Democrats only led by 1 point, 30 to 29%, with independents registering at around 40%. In Michigan's Wayne County, that's Detroit, over 40% of absentee ballots sent out have already been returned. Right. CBS News, your thoughts?
We might think we knew the results of elections a lot sooner in previous elections. We really didn't. It was just the margins were so large that we were able to call the elections earlier. It always takes a long time to count ballots. We're going to see that again, and margins are likely to be tight, so we might need to wait a few days in states like Georgia and elsewhere.
More on CBS News. Here's Nora O'Donnell, fresh off moderating the VP debate, illustrating why no Republican should ever go on that network again. Here she is with House Speaker Mike Johnson. This is what aired.
So that's a different accounting than this 2% you say was distributed.
Yeah, so they've obligated some funds, but they've only distributed 2%. The rescue and recovery effort's still going on, and then we address the rest of it.
And this was Mike Johnson's actual answer.
So that's a different accounting than this 2% you say was distributed.
Yeah, so they've obligated some funds, but they've only distributed 2%. And when I was there on the ground, and you should go, I mean, bring the cameras and talk to the people there. They'll tell you, don't take politicians' words for this or the administration's word. Talk to the people there on the ground. They had not been provided the resources almost 2 weeks out from the storm that they desperately needed. And when I was there, 13 days post the storm hitting that state, people are still being rescued. They're stuck in the higher elevations in the mountains because the roads are down and all the rest. So they need every available resource and all hands on deck. The rescue and recovery effort's still going on, and then we address the rest of it.
In other news, the University of Nevada's women's volleyball team voted to forfeit their match against San Jose State University owing to the latter school playing a dude who feels pretty on their volleyball squad. Nevada then issued a statement saying their volleyball team's vote on taking the forfeit in that match violated school policy, and they plan to proceed playing the match anyway. Nevada did say that players are free to sit out this game if they want. And finally, this from the Babylon Bee. Christians finding it easier to stop storing up treasure on earth under Biden. And that's what happened while we were away.
You know, it is worth remembering that this year, the Democratic National Convention offered free abortions in vans right out there on the street. It's hard to think of anything more disturbing and disgusting than that. And the man who may be our next vice president doesn't just support baby killing. He supports doctors being able to murder a child after that child is born. You cannot overstate the evil of this. And this year, it's even being called the abortion election, and for good reason. Over 64 million lives are gone courtesy of abortion in this country just since Roe versus Wade. We have to change that. And we have to start with the hearts and minds of women, and that's what preborn is all about. When a woman considers killing her child, murdering her own offspring, preborn is there. The power of the ultrasound that they show that mom, combined with God's love and grace, doubles the baby's chance at life. And one ultrasound is just $28. 5 ultrasounds, just $140. So if you want to donate securely and make a tax-deductible donation today to try and save a life, just dial pound 250, say the keyword baby, that's pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. I want to start with Wayne County, Michigan, because I just have a brief thought on that, because I just spent an extensive amount of time in Wayne County, Michigan. In fact, I drove much of the length of Woodward Avenue from the Detroit Zoo to Comerica Park, right out in the open on a Sunday afternoon, not 3 weeks ago. And got a good look at the city of Detroit and Wayne County, driving down Woodward Avenue there. And one of the things I saw in broad daylight on a Sunday, as I'm following the signs, Amy pings me, hey, look over here, I look over there. Just doing a drug deal right out open the street on a Sunday afternoon, right in broad daylight on Woodward there in Detroit, in Wayne County, Michigan. Maybe 2-3 miles from Comerica Park, maybe, and Ford Field, which are right across the street from each other. So apparently the city of Detroit, they can't do anything about that. But man, they can vote like a mother. They can vote. They know how to vote in Wayne County, Michigan. They know how to vote in Detroit.
Real patriots over there.
Cannot stop a drug deal out in the open on a Sunday, just blocks away from where about 50,000 people are going to come watch the final Major League Baseball game of the season at Comerica Park. All right, they can't do that. They can't stop that from happening, okay? But man, when it comes to voting, they've got a certain patriotic fervor that will not wane. So they're in. They can't clean up the drug deals in Wayne County, Michigan, but man, they can vote like a son of a gun.
God bless America.
Indeed. As they like to say in these Democrat blue states that are fortified with firewalls, the harvest is plenty and the ballots aren't few. So props to that. I want to go to what Bill Clinton said in Aaron's montage, because it also is an excellent dovetail with what we were just talking about with our friends over at Preborn. So I think it was Vivek Ramaswamy was one of the people that last year was getting into a bunch of trouble with the corporate media for propagating something that has largely been discussed within righty social media, but kind of hadn't made its way through the Fox News Overton window of what we're permitted to discuss on the right and what we are not. And that's replacement theory, right? I mean, I think he was the one that kind of, and even used that exact terminology to kind of break that through the Overton window there, and took a lot of heat for it. Okay. Can someone explain to me how what Bill Clinton says in that clip isn't replacement theory? I mean, the same people who said, hey, murder your offspring with impunity, we'll even incentivize it, we'll reward it. Well, we eliminated about 64 million of our own people in the last generation. Well, now we don't have those people, so they have to be replaced. So we're going to replace your murdered descendants with foreigners. When you are putting something instead of something, what is the word for that? When you're putting something instead of something, what's the...
paranoid conspiracy theory.
That's 3 words. Nice. What is the word for putting something in place of something instead of something? What would it be? It would be a replacement. I mean, is that not what Bill Clinton's advocating? And he's not alone, by the way. I mean, this is the globalists on both sides, this is the World Economic Forum crowd. They're big advocates of this, but you kill your offspring, we will reward you for it. We will incentivize you doing so. And then when the real world ramifications of those choices come due, then we will replace your descendants with foreigners. How is that not replacement theory? Confirmed, quantified, specified. How is it not?
It is. And it's even worse when they lay on the layers of, well, you don't want to pick your own lettuce, man. I mean, come on. You want to stay comfortable. I mean, and then everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. We got to do this for America. Listen, that's the same logic as the crackheads down on the avenue you just drove down. They're the same people. They're just great patriots. They're looking out for you. They're doing the math. And you don't even want to think about it. You resent having to do so.
I loved as a little kid, I loved the original Battlestar Galactica too, but it only lasted one season, and then ABC did a bunch of budget cutbacks and then tried to come up with something that was terrible, and it got canceled. Okay. But the remake of Battlestar Galactica that was on the Sci-Fi Channel about 15, 20 years ago, it's one of the top 10 television shows I've watched in my life.
It's insanely good.
It is incredibly good. Okay. One of the most sneaky good episodes of that whole series is so the Cylons, this robot army of AIs that that humanity built, has turned on them and wiped out almost all of humanity, and plans on, by the way, replacing them. Okay. They even graft flesh onto themselves. Okay. They end up becoming, their plan is to replace humanity. I mean, the parallels of this are striking. And one of the episodes in the very first season, so there's one old ship that was about to be retired, and the commander, Adama, recognized that they were under attack, and he gets them out of there, okay? But that's it. Him and a few of the ships he could take with him, okay, are all that's left of humanity in the cosmos, all right? And they're trying to outrun these Cylons. They're trying to hunt them down, eliminate them, so that they can replace them in the pecking order of existence. And the highest ranking government official, because the Cylons take out the capital, everything, and the highest ranking government official is, on the day they're retiring the Battlestar Galactica, the first of its kind interstellar travel ship, on the day they're retiring it and sending Adama off into retirement to bring in the new wave of equipment and generals, all right, who gets the short end of the stick, who goes to the ceremony? The Secretary of Education does. The Secretary of Education does. And she fancies herself a great big feminist, of course. All right. Well, now she's now the political leader of what's left of humanity, at least as far as they think. They're trying to get to this place called Earth that they've only heard about in myth, all right, where they've been told humanity reigns supreme. And so they're trying to get there. Okay. But as far as they know, they may be the only people left. And she's queen, essentially. And so she fancies herself as a big feminist. And during one of the episodes in the very first season, Adama walks into her quarters and on a whiteboard he writes down a number, and it was not very many, something like 50,000 and something, if I remember right. It's in the tens of thousands, okay? And he writes down a number, okay? And he looks at her and he says, "This is how many human beings total we have in this fleet. This is it. This is all that we have. And we need to consider the possibility that either this Earth does not exist, or we're never going to be able to find it, or it's going to take so long to find it that this quest is going to outlive our generation." Okay? This isn't sufficient. I can't man a fleet on this. I mean, we have to start training people right now. This isn't going to work. And she asks, "Well, what would you have me do?" He goes, "You need to ban abortion." I kid you not. This is in the plot of this show. I kid you not. He tells her, "You've got to ban abortion." And of course, she bristles right away at women's reproductive choice and health and freedom. He's like, "Cool. Anyway, that's a nice white paper you got there. Appreciate your thoughts. Anyway, have you seen this number? Here's the. Let me point you to beyond the theoretical to the reality. This is all the human beings on this whiteboard. This is all we have left. I need people. We need people. So, cool story, bro. Cool feminism, bro. I'm a soldier. I don't even care. Not my fight. My fight is making sure we survive. Okay? And we're up against an enemy that literally can just haul off soldiers off an assembly line in minutes, if not hours. Okay? We've got to gestate people for 9 months and then prepare them for 15, 20 years, okay, for what it will take to push back. So I don't care about your feminist sensibilities. I don't care about your academic beliefs and white papers, okay? This is now a game of survival. The only number that matters is this number on the whiteboard, so you've got to pull the plug on this now. What do you think she does at the end of the episode? Exactly that. Sounded all great. Yeah, let's just have all. Let's absolutely just completely just use each other for no other purposes other than however long an orgasm lasts for you as an individual. Okay, and discard the byproduct of that interaction over and over and over and over and over again, and consider ourselves tolerant and enlightened. But then sooner or later, Uncle Bingo, the check comes due. We're out of people. This ain't going to work. So start having babies, start having families. And this is the reality of nature and existence doesn't change because of our fanciful delusions. Bill Clinton is saying a variation of that, but it is a damnable one. Because he's not going to then turn around and say, and that's why, by the way, we need to stop aborting our children right now. Otherwise, we're just going to end up being completely replaced by Cylons or foreigners in every generation. No, his party is running on, keep killing your children, so we will then replace you with the foreigners. That is replacement theory incarnate. That is a group of elites who will get the plebes to kill off their offspring so they can't ever outnumber them and storm the Bastille and overturn them at the election ballot box or on the battlefield if it came to that. No, you don't have the numbers. And we own all the stealth bombers. So you're out, and we're going to bring in the foreigners, the migrants, the aliens, and they're going to work. They'll be happy to work for $8.50 an hour and do everything we say while we may remain in complete control. And you aborted yourself out of existence. That's exactly the plan. That's what's been executed here. And in the most literal of senses, Todd, that is what we are executing as a people on their behalf.
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, this is the latest version of did God really say? You know, if you look at it from this angle, this is what true freedom is. I mean, you last week did that brilliantly with how you talked about you just take the two greatest commandments, you don't change them, you just flip them. Mm-hmm. They're still there. And that's what the devil does. He perverts good things, and you see Bill Clinton teaching you the new math. You see, it's just about, remember me, old Bill Clinton, swinging Willie, playing the saxophone? Just, that's what we're trying to be here. That's what we're trying to do. Just look at it through that lens.
Yep.
Chuck Schumer back in November, of course, after the election, but back in November of 2022, he said almost the exact same thing. It's funny, some of these old school Democrats, when they let their guard down just a little bit, they say exactly what they mean. They say exactly what their goal is. The goal of the communist, the goal of the progressive is to always obfuscate their real goals, their real aims, couch it as something that it's really not, in order to turn it into a spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. But when they're off guard, when they let their guard down just a little bit, they'll tell you exactly what they're doing. They'll say the birth rate is not what it is. They won't even address why it is what it is. They won't even address that, but they'll say exactly that. And then furthermore, sometimes you'll even get them to say, if they, they'll either say, rarely, it's the birth rate, we got to replace all these people that we're not actually reproducing ourselves. They'll say that sometimes, rarely. A lot of times what you'll hear them say is, well, we just need human chattel. We need a modern form of slavery, essentially. Who's going to pick the lettuce? Who's going to pick the fill
at the wages we're willing to pay?
At the wages that we're willing to pay.
Yep. I mean, would you pick lettuce and cotton for $100,000 a year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want to pay that wage, though, do they?
Correct.
They want to pay $8.50 an hour, right?
Correct.
See, that's the caveat we always have to throw in there. It's not about the menial task or labor. It's about what it is they actually want to pay for said task and labor.
And then sometimes, like you saw at the Democrat National Convention with that crazy rando dude out on the street, sometimes you'll get them to say it's the birth rate, you need to be replaced. Sometimes you'll get them to say we just need a modern form of slavery. But then sometimes you'll get that. You remember that guy outside the DNC this year in Chicago saying, I would rather share a country with illegals than you. Sometimes they'll just say, you deserve to be replaced.
Correct. Replacement's not happening, but if it is,
you deserve it.
You deserve it.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
And to be clear, when you say letting their guard down, and I don't think you mean it's just like, oops, accident. Maybe that used to be back in the day, but I think it has as much to do with us, their audience. They're trying to figure out how much we've let our guard down when they put these out there. That's what I mean. There's Slick Willie, look. Yeah, he's a fun guy, just saying things. That math adds up. They're just trying to see if we're like, oh, yeah, 1 + 1 does equal cucumber. You're right. Let's do that. They're testing us all the time. That's why this is a great trial of the American people. It's not an election. It's about us.
I think if it was younger people, younger Democrats saying that, I think that contention would be right. I think when it comes to Chuck Schumer and Bill Clinton, they're not as on message as they once were.
No, I mean, Bubba is way past his prime. I mean, if those of us who remember going up against him 30 years ago, this is a shell of that player. Okay, so he would have been way slicker. We didn't call him Slick Willie for nothing. He'd have been way slicker and even, first of all, you've been slick enough to not even approach the premise of what we're discussing, let alone just saying it out loud. But I think it's also important here to remind you, because ultimately we are a biblical worldview show. That is our North Star. That is our prime directive. All right. And you need to understand here, anything whose basis is anti-life is demonic. Anything whose basis is anti-life is demonic. If you play into this, okay, it is demonic. This isn't Democrats. Frankly, it's not even just Democrats. Plenty of Republicans think this way too. But it's demonic. The going against of our nature. All right, unbridled human nature that is just not regenerated and therefore still awash in original sin is Elon Musk. It's your NBA player or Tyreek Hill with 10 baby mamas spreading his seed. That's unbridled human behavior. When we go against our nature, so remember this, human sinfulness is when we seek to exploit the natural urges, desires, ambitions, talents, abilities that God has created and placed within us. When we exploit them beyond the boundaries God has set for them to our own good. Demonic is when we deny those things. Those are monkey paw. Hey, it sounds great. You don't want to be, what did Barack Obama once famously say about his own daughters? I don't want them punished with a baby. Mm-hmm. It sounds really great, right? It sounds great when you're in the midst of the experience. Then you wake up one day, you're 44, unmarried. It's too late for you to have children. And you realize this is not the life that I wanted. But it sounded great at 19, didn't it? All the propaganda did. That is an absolute Faustian bargain. That is Devil and Daniel Webster stuff. Whenever we go against our natures and ambitions, when we deny them, that is demonic. Anything that is anti-life is demonic at its core. And so is this theory we're talking about. Is it some of Darwin's descent of man? Sure. Is it some notion of Malthusian ethics? Maybe. Is it utilitarian? Is it globalist? It's all those things, but that's not sufficient for what it really is. And you cannot defeat an enemy that you don't understand what its driving force and impulse is, and who actually is the one driving the train. It is not natural for human societies to not propagate themselves. That is not natural. The natural instinct is for kings to have concubines and harems and how many wives did David and Solomon have? That is the sinful instinct. It is not natural to say, we're not going to propagate ourselves at all. That is anti-life, and that is demonic. For no one hates us as much as hell does. And this is why, aside from the men, our other big target here for this show is the church. Because it is the only institution ultimately with the message and the weaponry to defeat these kinds of forces in a culture. Which is why, not coincidentally, every time the church either has been abrogated, meaning they have decided unto themselves to just tap out, or they have faced an external conqueror that has driven them underground, like Islam or the Chinese communists, these sorts of ideologies are what come and assert themselves with the church off the board. We will not be able to vote our way out of these kinds of schemes. We can slow them down, we can give ourselves time, but ultimately without the church, we cannot defeat these things because they do not come from this world. More in a moment. Hey, I want to welcome a new partner here to the show. And this is our brand new friend, Farmer Bill's. We all know how important lean supply chains are. Increasingly, our beef industry is dominated by those backed by big corporations, particularly that have some Chinese money involved. That's why we want to tell you about a new America First beef company that just launched a meat processing plant in South Dakota. Their name is Farmer Bill's, and what they're selling isn't just beef, it's beef biltong, and it is phenomenal. Unlike conventional beef jerky that's loaded with sugar, soy, nitrates, and fillers, biltong is an air-dried delicacy that we're just now discovering here in America. It's a cured meat stack without the sugar, soy, nitrates, and fillers. And Farmer Bill's is an America First company with a fully American supply chain. They source their beef and bison from the grasslands of South Dakota and support American ranchers. Their flavors include original beef, spicy chili beef, original bison, spicy chili bison. That reminds me, I forgot to bring in you guys the samples again, and I forgot. Dang it. I got to remember to do that, all right? Because the spicy chili beef is the one I have tried, and it's good living, man. That is some good stuff, all right? So get their bestseller bundle. You get all 4 flavors, all right? You can use code Steve for 10% off that order when you go to Farmer Bill's and check out what they've got to offer to you at farmerbillsprovisions.com. That's farmerbillsprovisions.com. Get 10% off with the promo code Steve off their bestseller bundle. All right? farmerbillsprovisions.com, promo code Steve.
Aaron, how far do you think you and I fell down the pecking order while Steve was ensconced in the basement just...
subterranean, apparently. I've wanted to try biltong for a long time. That's why I was excited when I saw they're a new sponsor. So I'm going to have to send you a text maybe tomorrow.
Ping me
tomorrow night.
All right. So it's in my snack drawer.
It looks really good.
Your samples are. So my bad. I'm sorry about that. All right. Let's get to some idolatry or not here on the Steve Deace Show. And we have spoken quite a bit here, particularly as of late, as we are heading down the stretch here of this election with 3 weeks to go until, we formally start counting votes. I think we're already voting in like 46 states already as it is right now. But we are 3 weeks until formally Election Day. But we've had a lot of conversation about the failure of the church to engage culturally and politically. We had that just typical but yet still heartbreaking note. I think it was from Erin on Friday, who works at a church, that told her she could put up a sign about opposing the Kill 'Em All amendment in her state. And then the campus pastor spoke to the head pastor, and we have to take that down because it would turn the lost away from Jesus, apparently, or something. Okay, right. Yeah, there's that. All right. But I want to talk about, for at least a few minutes, okay, what is going too far? All right. Let me, and I'm going to bring up 2 examples, and I don't mean for these 2 examples. Let me say up front, they're not set up examples. Okay. They're not set up examples. All right. But these are examples of either the church engaging or being called to engage. Okay. So I just think it's fair to look at it the other way too, right? I think all 3 of us, this goes without saying, but just in case it does not, we're not asking for the first church of American independence here. We're not asking for that, right? Right. Okay. What we're just asking for is the church to be a prophetic witness, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're not demanding here, okay, that the church that from John 3:16 to America, love it or leave it. That's not what we're calling for here. All right. And
the entrance hymn is Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Yes. We're not doing that. That's not replacing Amazing Grace. Okay. Yes. All right. So let's make sure we don't go too far. All right. I try to most days on my social media accounts post a theology question. And it's something just to get people talking theology. And it's either something I'm either thinking about or something somebody asked me or something that just kind of came to mind. Okay. This morning, I was reading an article from NBC News, so, put all the appropriate disclaimers on it therein, okay? But I was fascinated to get their view of this. So there was a rally in Washington, D.C. this weekend, okay, primarily calling for women to march. Let me find that here. Christians, here's the headline of the article. Christians flocked to Washington to pray for America to turn to God by electing Trump. It's called the Million Women March. I'd not even heard of this. Had you guys heard of this?
No.
Neither did I. All right. And even by the and even by corporate media, they're saying tens of thousands showed up. So that means they had a massive crowd for this. All right. It was organized by a guy Lou Engle, who NBC News refers to as, quote, a self-described prophet, unquote. He said that God told him in a dream to call on 1 million women to march on Washington in order to restore God's dominion over the nation. NBC describes Engel as a leader in what's called the New Apostolic Reformation. There's a lot of talk about this within evangelicalism. We don't have time to get into that right now. I know some people for and against it. We could maybe do a show on it at some point. Okay. But NBC describes it as a movement of charismatic Christians who for years have portrayed U.S. politics as a spiritual clash between good and evil, and that Trump is a flawed leader but anointed by God to redeem the nation. Now, I actually don't think that description of what these kinds of people think, even though it's from NBC News, I don't think it's that far off, right? We've seen a lot of this. You know, I've referred to Trump as kind of the first TBN presidency, right? We've all, if you're in any form of Christian circle at all, we've all seen the memes of Jesus with, hand on Trump's shoulder in the Oval Office or everywhere else, right? Okay. So there is clearly a movement within Christendom that does feel this way and believe this. So I don't think this is necessarily, there are some pejoratives later in this article, okay? But I don't think this description in and of itself is a pejorative, okay? Is this going too far? And we don't agree doesn't mean it's too far. You see what I'm saying? Or when I say going too far, it has to be something that isn't that right away would be like if this guy Lou Engle says God in a dream told me to get 1 million people together and deny the Trinity, we would all say, Todd and Aaron, or Aaron and you, me and you as evangelicals, you as a Catholic, we would all say verboten, right? That's what I mean by going too far. All right. Doesn't mean something that we're not comfortable with or isn't the way we would do it or how we would say it. Maybe we wouldn't participate in it, but point blank, opinion is not idolatry, is what I'm trying to say. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. What makes us uncomfortable doesn't mean it's idolatry. Okay. All right. Is this just not my bag, not how I would roll, not how I'd say it? Probably going to a place I wouldn't go. Doesn't mean it's idolatry, though. Or would you view this as flat out idolatry?
Well, the degree to which there's any Trump is God's anointed, that would be idolatry. Now, I don't know how much that's laced in with all of this, which is not to say he or others can't be, but that's
too far for you.
Yeah, that's...
Is there a distinction for you between he has an anointing and he is anointed? Because I do think there's that distinction can be
theoretically, yes, but as it applies to Donald Trump, we don't have... This is unnecessary. It's not... It's the entirely wrong approach to take from a Christian perspective on this. We talked about this yesterday. Like, you have a better opportunity as a Christian in every single state now to protect life than you did. Now, whether Donald Trump is amazed that happened at all, but it happened on his watch. We should talk like that. Putting the whole, basically the God's anointed stuff is the verbal version of the Jesus image on Trump's shoulder. I don't think that's helping the conversation at all.
Before I go to Aaron, one more thing on this, though. Is it fair, and if it's not, tell me, is it fair that there's a certain lingo amongst evangelicals along these kinds of lines that kind of makes Catholics uncomfortable, similar to how the Mary stuff can make Protestants uncomfortable?
Oh, I think probably sometimes, but actually the Orthodox, non-squish Catholics like me, I mean, it doesn't bother me, generally speaking, as it applies to Donald Trump. It's like I said, it's the verbal version of me of the picture that you described, and that picture is stupid and useless at best.
Okay. Aaron, what do you think?
So your original question is, what is crossing the line?
Yes.
I don't know, but I'd like to find out someday.
That's a good answer. Let's look for some lines to cross and then work our way back from there.
So
yes.
This is happening when? October of an election year, this million. Let me ask you a question. Why isn't June Life Month already? Why isn't the church just annoying the hell out of people during Life Month? Why don't we have parades? Why aren't we actually trying to vie for permitting with all the pride parades in the cities? Why aren't we trying to get up in their grill during the month of June? That's the questions we should be asking here. Because we're framing this in what we have typically seen from the church. If there is political engagement, it's a means to an end to get their people to vote.
Yep.
We just show up once every 4 years. Vote GOP for better judges. We got them last time, and that's why we're talking about why June should be Life Month. The framing is out of whack here. We're looking at this from a typical American church, GOP, intersection, vote every 4 years standpoint. When really what's needed is a day in and day out grind. You look at the religiosity of pastors in America compared to the average leftists. There's no competition. The leftist is more religious than the American pastor, and that's why we're losing. I read that account yesterday from one of Tim Pool. I'm not a huge fan of Tim Pool, but one of his producers. Now, I'm not saying that Christians should act like this, but saying that his sister, when he was in California visiting family to introduce them to his new, I think, daughter or son, his sister just lit him up in front of the family, called him a Russian asset, a Russian stooge, threatening to blow up the family because of politics. Now, I'm not saying that Christians should do that. No, I'm just saying that to illustrate the religiosity, the degree to which the lefty views their belief system as a religion, that they must take dominion not only over their own bodies, but their family. That's how they view it. There's nowhere close to that level of religious fervor, I should say. The dogma does not live loudly inside of us, Amy Coney Barrett. And so I think this conversation is completely out of whack and out of frame.
I kind of hear you saying, even before I even contemplate whether that's my bag or not, I kind of like their way of doing something over everybody else's way of not doing anything.
A little bit.
A little bit? Yeah. All right. Fair. Okay. All right. This one also, and from a guy I know, guy I like, been on our show before, been on his show many times, Eric Metaxas. He tweeted out over the weekend, this got a lot of discussion on Christian X. Big accounts were discussing this with huge comments, okay, discussing this tweet. If your pastor doesn't insist, and he writes that in all caps, insist you vote in his next sermon, he may as well preach on the blessings of abortion. It's the same thing. And if you attend a church like that, you share in the guilt. It's almost past time that the American church repents and turns from its wicked ways. Some people thought that went too far. Some people thought it was right on the money. Some people thought the spirit of it was right on the money, but specifics, like, well, why does that have to be the next sermon? If we do this every single week, but your thoughts, and Aaron, I'll start with you now.
Again, I would like to be in a position. What have we always talked about with like young men? You would like to be in the position as a father of young men where you're trying to dial back the aggression. You're trying to dial back the instinct to act and sometimes act violently rather than just trying to prod and poke it. It's that meme. I mean, the American church is that meme of the little stick figure with a twig and he's poking something and he's like, come on, move, do something. That we are the object in that meme. Well, I would rather dial back this instinct rather than trying and failing to provoke it over and over and over again. So I think if you're responding to that if you're a person responding to that tweet from Metaxas, which I saw over the weekend, if you're responding to that and just whole cloth just condemning Eric Metaxas for that, just completely condemning that notion, I think you're telling on yourself.
All right. Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that, but then it'll surprise other people. If you just take this in a vacuum, because I know what Eric's doing is that he's applying it to this specific election, but it sounds like just within this, he's making a more general. It is not your Christian duty to vote for the President of the United States no matter what. I don't believe that. To the degree that's in there, again, he may have said many other things.
The choices are Herod and Pilate. You have to vote. That's kind of what you're saying, all right?
Or pick. You don't even need to put names on it. I don't. There's, and even now, as you laid out yesterday, you gave plenty of grace on this election. So you on some level agree. But once it gets, the specifics are ultimately where we weigh and measure this thing. But I don't think it's not a good, just like before I said, it's not a good look to, basically do the Jesus picture. It's not a good look to say it's your Christian duty to vote no matter what. That's not biblical.
If someone wanted to make the claim that, let's decide then what we all would think would be going too far. Saying that U.S. manifest destiny and place in the world is synonymous with Christianity. Would that be going too far?
Probably.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, manifest destiny was an amazing endeavor, but if blown out of context, that's basically the prosperity gospel.
To some degree.
If it's just about stuff, because ultimately our faith has to be just as strong when we're not prospering, when we're not moving forward, when we're actually being persecuted.
Right on. Okay. I kind of like what you have been saying, Aaron. We are so far away from systemically going too far. Even entertaining the question is kind of a waste of time to some degree.
Yeah.
Fair. All right. Can we have a comprehensive cultural bipartisan discussion about the state of our boys? We're going to try next. All right, back here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Hour 2 underway. Steve Deace here with Aaron McIntyre, Todd Erzin, and all of you. And you can all let us know what you think, though hopefully not all at once, by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X/Twitter, Instagram, and then TikTok. And then also, if you want to sign up for our brand new YouTube channel, it's at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. Finally, if you listen to the podcast version and you wouldn't mind doing this for us, hit us up with a 5-star review, only if you like us, of course. If you don't like the show, we would never ask you to lie. You might be thinking, though, what if I only kind of like it? Well, we would ask you to exaggerate. We would do that. All right, we would not ask you to lie, but we would ask for your exaggeration. All right, so leave us a 5-star review. And then also, thank you to all of you who have, and then also hit subscribe or follow if you're on iTunes, and that'll make sure every time we do another one of these episodes, it shows up in your podcast feed every single time. And those offerings that you make help us to appease the rather finicky and fickle algorithmic gods. So thank you for those offerings. Also want to thank our friends over at Raycon for bringing you this portion of the show. Their everyday earbuds are made to make your everyday a little easier. And every time they update the product, as they just did recently, they add new features to make them even easier to use. For example, their everyday earbuds now feature a 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. There's also active noise cancellation, which makes activities like long flights so much easier. I've told you guys before, these are the best noise cancellation headphones, earbuds I've ever tried. All right. They're available in a variety of vibrant colors. I don't think, though, they have come out with pumpkin spice yet for me. I'm going to check on that. All right. So you can complement any and all of your skin tones, plus so many other additional features as well, like the quick charge function. 10 minutes of charging yields you 90 minutes of battery. You can't beat it, folks. So if you want to try them out, stop the fuss and go to Buy Raycon, RAYCON, as in Nancy, RAYCON, buyraycon.com/Steve. They offer a 30-day happiness guarantee, so if you make a return, it's pretty darn easy to get your money back. And you'll get 25% off site-wide as well, or 50% off, I should say. 20 to 50% off site-wide when you go to buyraycon.com/Steve. That's buyraycon.com/Steve. The name of the book, BoyMom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity, from Ruth Whippman, and she joins us now here today on the show. And Ruth, it's a pleasure to have you with us here on The Blaze, and we thank you for your time and appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So just so you get a little background on us, I don't know what you know. Obviously, we're, with a platform like this, we're pretty much from the right side of the aisle.
Yes.
But you're addressing a topic that we have a lot of interest in. I came from a 15-year-old mom. I didn't have a biological father in the home. She ended up marrying a stepdad when I was 3, who ended up being very abusive. I did not have a lot of great masculine role models growing up. And like a lot of those kinds of boys in Generation X, from relationships and pornography, all those daddy wounds that you typically have. I had more than my share of those scars. Okay. And so, my wife has literally been married to me as she has seen, with the right kinds of influences in my own life, me essentially try to learn what it means to really be a man on the fly. Trying to reach men in this audience is one of our prime directives of this audience. I've got 2 daughters and a son of my own. He's our youngest. He's a senior in high school now, and if you've ever wanted to know how that boys and girls are different, raise both kinds at the same time and you will learn that lesson. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm fascinated to see if there's a possibility that we can have a very broad conversation on a cultural level about something that you are pointing out is a problem, and that is the state of our young men. My wife is a therapist. Okay. So
Wonderful.
All the mental health issues and everything else that she sees all this every single day in her practice. Yeah. Okay. So with that and kind of my background, I kind of was hoping now you might introduce yourself to our audience so they can learn a little bit more about you.
Well, thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that sort of generous introduction and your willingness to have a kind of good faith conversation about these issues, because I think, we have a lot of common ground. Now, I'm a mother of 3 boys. They're 14, 11, and 6. And this is, as you put up on your screen, this is my book, BoyMom. And I'm writing about my experience of being somebody who comes broadly from the left. I always identified as a feminist. I devoted a lot of my career to writing and thinking about the rights of women and girls and how we can achieve equality. And I always sort of imagined that I'd be a mom of girls. I sort of saw myself in that role. And then I had 3 boys. And I agree with you. I think they are different. I think not all boys and not all girls, and these are averages, but I agree with you that there are some differences. And I think that in this moment, the book is a combination of memoir from my own experience of raising boys and reporting about what it means to be a boy and to raise a boy in this incredibly fraught cultural moment, where I think that the conversations that we're having about boyhood have really been weaponized in a way which is not helpful for boys. It's not helpful for parents. And, it's causing us a lot of problems. So I wanted to have, my reporting in this book, I talk to people of all different types of political background. I go to see programs that take all kinds of different approaches. I talk to many, many boys themselves about the issues that they're dealing with in their lives. And, a lot of what I found on that journey surprised me. A lot of it challenged my own preconceptions. A lot of it confirmed some of my preconceptions, but I wanted to approach this conversation in good faith.
Let's start with what you found that challenged your preconceptions. What would be some of those things that you found as you were putting this book together?
Okay. So I think the first was when I looked at the kind of gender science, you know, the nature-nurture debate. And I think I'd grown up with a version of feminism that was like, these differences are all socialized. You know, it's just, you start with a blank slate and you kind of impose whatever on them. And if boys behave like boys because we raise them like boys, and girls behave like girls because we raise them like girls. And when I dug into the actual science of it, which I kind of look at a lot in the book, I found that there really are a lot of differences in boys and girls. And again, these are on average, they're group level differences, but there are some differences that are rooted in nature, you know, in brain development and the timeline of that, and in hormones. So that was a big thing for me. And in some ways it was kind of validating. You know, my boys were extremely rambunctious, they're wild, they conform to all the sort of boyish stereotypes in the sense of they're very physical. You know, I would see my friends with their daughters, you know, and they'd be playing nicely with a little tea set or something, and my boys would be wreaking havoc. And I think in a way, seeing some of that science really validated me and made me feel like, oh, I'm not a terrible mom after all.
I want to ask you about the term in your subtitle, okay?
Yeah.
And I'll give your guys' side of the aisle credit. No one writes long book subtitles like the American right does, and I've done this myself several times. Our subtitles are like a chapter of the book. Okay,
I love that. What's your subtitle?
Reimagining boyhood in the age of impossible masculinity.
Yeah.
So, what? Let's start there. Define impossible masculinity for us.
Yeah, so there was a very long discussion about what this subtitle would be. And I think that we were very keen not to use the phrase toxic masculinity, which was the British version of the book actually does have toxic masculinity as the subtitle. And that wasn't really my choice to do that. But the reason why I think impossible masculinity is a better phrase to use is partly because I think toxic masculinity just shuts down conversations. I think boys hear it and they think, ugh, you're demonizing me. You're saying that I'm harmful, that I'm toxic. And, you know, the phrase has taken on a life of its own. I think what I was trying to convey with impossible masculinity is that it feels impossible in all directions. So I think what boys were telling me when I interviewed them is that there's this kind of old story which comes mainly from the right, but from everybody really, which is boys have to be tough, they have to be stoic, they mustn't show their emotions, they have to be superhuman almost and invulnerable and never show weakness, never show human flaws. And I think that is an impossible standard to live up to. I think it's not healthy. I think a lot of the downstream mental health effects that we're seeing on boys are from that narrative. But then there's also a new narrative, which is coming maybe more from the left, which is, you know, boys, you're toxic. It's time for you to shut up. You know, everything you do is wrong. You know, everybody else. It's time for you've taken up too much space. It's time for everybody else to have the floor and for you to be quiet. Mm-hmm. So I think boys are feeling kind of silence from all sides. They're like, don't show your emotions because you have to be such a tough guy, and don't show your emotions because you're a sort of toxic predator. And so I think what boys were telling me was they found that it was just impossible to know how to be, and nobody was interested in listening to them. Everybody was interested in projecting onto them, and nobody was interested in hearing what they had to say.
A little bit like one of the very first episodes of The Simpsons. They asked Bart, his teacher asked Bart Simpson, hey, can you define a catch-22? And he says, damned if you do, damned if you don't. All right. So that's kind of what you're defining there. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I say to our audience all the time, and I'd love to get your take on this. I don't believe there's any such thing as toxic masculinity. I think there's only masculinity, and all male behavior that isn't masculine is what's toxic. And how would I define that masculinity? The instinct to protect, to defend, to provide. I don't think it's an emotional disposition. I think they're character traits. Okay, I think you could be a guy with a receding hairline who weighs 160 pounds, working at a terminal, at a computer. But you're protecting, you're providing, you're defending. You don't necessarily have to be a Navy SEAL. Okay, I don't know how to change my own oil, for example. Okay, so I don't think we're dealing with emotions or dispositions or giftedness. I think we're dealing with intrinsic traits: protecting, defending, providing, adventuring, risk taking. Those, I think, are the God-given masculine instincts, which you even defined that you are seeing with your own boys, even at a young age. Okay, and that's how I think it. And I think that's what previous generations. That's how they used to define masculinity, more than just a disposition or a set of personality characteristics. I think they're intrinsic character traits, and I think when men act that way, they're being masculine. When they behave outside of those things, that's what I think is toxic. How would you respond to that?
I mean, I think this can get into a very kind of semantic debate about what exactly the word masculinity means. And I think people define it, as you've said, in different ways. I believe that there are some, you see, my feeling is that all of these things, strength, bravery, courage, and also the traits that we associate with femininity. So, for instance, nurturing, empathy, caregiving, relationship building. I think all of these are human traits. I think all humans have the ability to embody those traits. I think some of the strongest, bravest, most courageous people I know are women. I'm sure, that the mothers who raised us, that, many of the strong women that we all know embody those kinds of traits. And many men I know are extremely caring and empathetic. And so I would rather not give those traits a gender. I would rather that we didn't say, men are these things and women are these things, and just allow everybody to be human.
How would we know what is human?
Well, I mean, all of these things are human. Humans have the capacity for all kinds of incredibly wise and wonderful behavior. And they have the capacity
also terrible behavior, though, at the same time.
Behavior.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All the time. And that's every human. That's not, that's every single one of us has the capacity for good and for bad. And those things are not to do with gender. And I think that, yes, there is more of a tendency for men probably to behave in ways which are more stereotypically considered masculine, and there is a tendency for women to behave in ways that are stereotypically considered feminine. But those are not exclusive terms, and I think we don't really help anybody when we say you have these 5 traits and you have those 5 traits because you're male and you're female. And I think then we kind of cut people off from their full sense of themselves.
Why do you think your boys behave differently when you have play dates and gatherings than the girls do?
So I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of hormonal influences. So there's definitely research that shows that although boys and girls have very similar levels of testosterone before puberty, in the womb, male fetuses are bathed in testosterone. So that has an impact on behavior, especially what we call rough and tumble play. And you can see it in other species. So you can see it in rats, you can see it in monkeys, and when you manipulate that process in the lab on rats, you can see that, that it is a biological process. If you give female rats more testosterone in the womb, you can see that they play in those ways. They're more likely to play in those kind of rough and tumble ways. And I think there's brain maturity. Boys, one of the things that was so fascinating to me when I was researching this book was that when a baby boy is born, his brain is around a month to 6 weeks behind a baby girl's brain in terms of right brain development. So that's the part of the brain that deals with emotional self-regulation, so the ability to calm yourself down when you are agitated, and relationship building and attachment. So the fact that a baby boy's brain is more immature at birth means that he is more vulnerable to disruption. We think of baby boys as being tougher and sturdier and more robust, but actually they're more fragile and more vulnerable to disruption, so anything that can kind of go wrong for a baby in terms of abuse or neglect or any of poor parenting, poor schools, poor daycare, all of those things have been shown to have a greater impact on male infants than on female infants because of that innate vulnerability.
Where do you think that innate vulnerability comes from?
I mean, I think this is just a gestational thing. It's very complex. I mean, I'm not a brain scientist, and I can't really dig into that exact, neuroscience of it. That's not my field. But I think that what ends up happening is that because there's an innate part to it, boys are innately more vulnerable at birth than girls. But then because of our culture, we try to sort of masculinize them. So it becomes this double whammy. So, there's all this research that shows that people respond to baby girls differently than they do to baby boys, even when they're displaying the same behavior. So they touch them in different ways. They kind of jiggle boys around, they roughhouse with them, where they sort of give girls more like caretaking and nurturing touch. We talk to girls using a different vocabulary. We talk to them more about their emotions, their feelings, whereas we tend to kind of ignore boys' feelings and talk to them with kind of instructions and commands. We wrestle with boys where we sort of maybe give girls more of that emotional nurture. And I think this builds up, boys need more care in that sense, but they get less. They're told to be tough, to be strong, to man up, to get out there. And I think what ends up happening is the combination, they need more, they get less, ends up having really serious downstream effects on boys and their ability to connect, their ability to develop the skills of empathy, the ability to be mentally and emotionally healthy.
Why do you think we do that instinctively with how we treat boys and girls? Why do you think?
I think it's to do with our culture and what we believe that boys and girls are and what we believe that they need. So I think that people often do this out of love. It's not that people hate their baby boys, so they don't give them the same nurture as their baby girls. They believe that the boy needs to be tough and manly and masculine. So there's this classic study from the 70s where you see when they give adults a baby that's dressed neutrally, so the adult can't tell if it's a boy or a girl. When that baby cries, if the adult is told that that baby is a boy, whether or not it's a boy or a girl, when that baby cries, they believe that he is angry. Whereas when the baby cries and they are told it's a girl, they believe that she's scared or distressed. So automatically we're projecting these different qualities onto boys and girls. And I think this is, it's so embedded in our culture in every way possible. And so, it's not necessarily that we're doing it out of neglect. I think we're doing it out of love. And there's all these population studies that show that, boys receive more harsh discipline, that parents feel more sort of warmly and close towards daughters than towards sons. And, that boys grow up in a more kind of subtly hostile environment than girls do.
Do you think there are fundamental differences between boys and girls as a general rule?
As on average, these are statistical averages. So, it sort of works in the same way as, say, height. There are some men that are shorter than some women, but in general, men are taller than women. So, yes, I think that there are population level differences in the way that boys and girls tend to behave.
Ruth, what's the masculine ideal that you and your husband are raising your sons to, that you want them to reach and achieve? Who or what is that, and what is that based on?
So honestly, I wouldn't say it was a masculine ideal. I would say it's a human ideal. And, we want our sons to be all of those qualities that we talked about before. We want them to be brave and to be courageous and to show courage in the face of adversity. And we also want them to be empathetic and nurturing and have the ability to form deep emotional connections with other people. And so I think once we start saying, these are masculine or feminine qualities, I'd rather just see these as qualities that we would love to see our sons embody. And we also want to extend forgiveness and grace to them. They're human, they're kids, they're not perfect, in the same way that all of us are not perfect.
What do you think people like me are the most wrong about on this subject?
That's such an interesting question. I I don't want to say that it's about being wrong or right. I would say that I think that people on the right are not really acknowledging how much pressure all this talk about masculinity puts on boys and men and how much it kind of shuts them down. And I would say on our side, on the left side, that I think that we are also not acknowledging how much of the kind of negativity and negative talk about boys and men is affecting them too. So I think we all have stuff to learn and to talk about where, to allow boys to speak, to be themselves, to be fully human. I think this is coming from everywhere.
One last question, and I'm asking this as respectfully as I can, but I think it goes to the heart of writing a book like this.
Yeah.
Are there certain traits that your husband embodies that you view to be something he uniquely can provide for you as a man, and that you want your sons to emulate? You want your sons to emulate. You want your sons to, well, aside from the obvious, but you want your sons to be able to emulate when they are men.
I think that my husband embodies all kinds of wonderful traits because he's him. And, he's a unique individual. Yes, he's a man. Yes, he was socialized as a man. In many ways, he presents as very typically masculine, and his interests are sort of typically masculine. I don't think that in and of itself, I mean, it's a really tricky question to answer in the sense of yes, I am a straight woman who is attracted to men, and and so
Why?
There is masculinity in the
mix. Why do you think you're attracted to men?
I think that sexual orientation is really a sort of biological thing that, are you asking me what is it in men that I'm attracted to?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of things, all kinds of traits. And yes, some of them are traditionally masculine and some of them are traditionally associated with femininity. So I'm attracted to men who are smart and funny and who are interesting thinkers and who show some courage. I'm also interested in men who are empathetic, and I think all of these traits that I'm mentioning, I know many women who also embody them. And that is not to say that there is no such thing as a sort of masculine vibe and that there is anything wrong with that at all. I think that is wonderful in many people. But I think, once we start saying, you need to be masculine in order to be worthy as a boy, I think that's where we start to fall apart.
Name of the book, BoyMom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity. There it is.
There it is.
And we've got a good high gloss photo of it there on the screen for the audience as well. Ruth Whippman, this has been very illuminating, Ruth. And I'm glad to see we used to be able to have these kinds of concerns that were apolitical. It was just everybody wanted the best for their sons and daughters, regardless of how they voted. So I applaud you for bringing this to the pages of the New York Times. I didn't get a chance to read the book yet, but I have read your op-ed there. So appreciate you bringing that subject and bringing this to a different light. It certainly is necessary, and appreciate your time today, all right? Thank you.
I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Ruth. Brought to you by our friends over at Heritage Foundation, over at Hillsdale College. We've had Heritage Foundation, but not anymore. Hillsdale College is the great American college with huge and effective educational outreach on behalf of liberty. They're giving away free copies of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence before the November election. If you want to get one right now, they're available for a limited time, and shipping is free. They want to get these into the hand. This is the ultimate voter guide, the Constitution. They want to get these in the hands of as many people as they possibly can. So if you want to get a free copy mailed to you right now, just go to daceforhillsdale.com, F-O-R, daceforhillsdale.com right now. Complete a simple form there. They'll put it in the mail for you with free shipping. Again, this offer expires soon. Get your free pocket Constitution today at daceforhillsdale.com. That's D-E-A-C-E-F-O-R, daceforhillsdale.com. Yet again, that is daceforhillsdale.com. Well, I'm going to call an audible if you guys are okay. And we're going to push the Pop Culture Tuesday topic to the overtime. if you guys are okay with that.
Well, they're kind of related, so
they are
yeah.
certainly symbiotic for sure. But we're gonna do Pop Culture Tuesday today for our Blaze TV subscribers over at blazetv.com/Deace. That's also where you can go to become a subscriber right now. blazetv.com/Deace. We'll get into that Pop Culture Tuesday topic then, because I imagine the conversation we just had with Ruth Whippman has. I haven't even looked at my inbox yet, but I'm sure it's going to get some reaction. I know you guys have some reaction as well.
Sure.
But let me say this and reiterate this before we get some reaction, because we're up against the break anyway, so you don't have time to really entertain you guys' thoughts in depth yet as it is. We have always wanted to do more of these kinds of conversations, and it's not been... Todd can tell you over the years, I mean, he's been booking this show since 2014, 2015. Okay, so it's going on almost a decade now. And we have tried numerous times, and it doesn't always work out. So I want to make sure we give Ruth the highest amount of grace for coming on here.
Yes.
And
including
answering
right now online, if you're putting out that tweet, have a discussion, make it robust, make it passionate, but treat her with respect, just like she did us.
Correct. And I tried to ask some questions where that would be very revealing from a worldview standpoint, and she answered them with aplomb, man. So, I mean, I think that was, we can discuss what we think of her answers here in a few minutes, but the fact that she was willing to come on here, and hopefully she'll feel as if she was treated respectfully as well when you talk to her and her people after the fact, Todd. But we like to say on our show, it's not that we are arguing too much as Americans. It's that we're not really arguing at all. We are trolling and memeing each other to death. We're canceling each other and national divorcing each other, but that's not necessarily an argument, right? And an argument includes some form of contrarian dialogue between two parties. So, and that dialogue, I think, has to occur for everybody to know where the other side is coming from. Okay, in the questions that I asked Ruth, you can tell which premise I am coming from, probably in how I framed the questions. And there is a definitive worldview chasm between the two of us, even though we share a common concern as parents of boys. Okay. And I will tell you the social data trends that Ruth cites in her book, and she alluded to here in this interview. My wife can just tell you, even in Des Moines, Iowa, she sees this every day in her practice. The amount, particularly young boys, but young people in general, that they have to turn away, they're out of room. They don't have room for any more patients. So this is a conversation that needs to be had. Now, there's going to be some disagreement probably on the solutions. We'll probably have some of those disagreements, I would imagine, when we come back. But it's a dialogue that we must have. More in a moment. Hurricane Milton made landfall last week. At least 16 people died. Millions were without power in Florida until today. 4 million people have had their power restored by Governor DeSantis. Dude is just a crisis managing machine. But yet, it's for situations like this that we must be prepared. Our good friend Molly James, for example, on the ground right now in North Carolina. She's going to be on the show later this week.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's out there, saying they're digging out from 3 weeks ago. They're still short of supplies there. Okay. This is why we bring to you partners like our friends at Jace Medical. Get the Jace case so that you've got, just in case, some of the most important antibiotics humanity has ever discovered. Doxycycline, amoxicillin, for example. And then you can also expand it to they've got an increasing menu of medications. So whatever you specifically need. Right? Didn't we hear a story last week that they had to airlift somebody out because, wasn't that one of the stories Jill actually told us when she went down there with Mercury One, right? Someone had lost their heart medicine and they had to airlift them off the mountain to get it to them, right? Mm-hmm. All right. That's again, man, that's why we bring you partners like Jace Medical, because those are the things that you've got the peace of mind. If that situation ever happens, you're ready. So take advantage of my last name, Dace, for your discount right now. Use the promo code DACE at jace.com, Jase, JASE.com is where you want to go. Use the code DACE at checkout, jace.com/DACE, jace.com/DACE. Enter the code DACE at checkout for the discount on your order at Jace Medical. All right, I want to get some reaction, and we can discuss from you guys both how you thought the interview in and of itself went, and then also the specifics of the answers to the questions that she was asked.
So I again want to echo and applaud her for coming on, and she knew the type of show that this is. I think she asked some questions along those lines, Todd, in the lead up to this interview. So she knew the type of show that she was coming on, the environment that she was coming on, and she still came on the program anyway. So that in and of itself needs to be applauded, because as you said, we do not even have enough debates or arguments in this country. We have tantrums. We have, again, invoking it for the third time, that account from one of Tim Pool's producers, still sticking in my mind about the extended family just blowing up over politics. We don't have these conversations anymore. And I'll say just one thing. The assertion that she provided on a couple of occasions that it should be okay. It should be okay for men to act like men, for boys to act like boys. That's okay. You're not inherently right or wrong because of what's between your legs. That's not mainstream in the political left right now. And if that were mainstreamed, I think we would probably all agree that that would be a healthy thing for our country. And I'll tell you, it's not mainstream within the modern Democrat Party because of how you see the Kamala campaign behaving right now. They're flailing in their attempts to reach men because they don't know how to, because it's been mainstreamed in that persuasion that it's not okay to act like a man. It's not okay to do some of these stereotypically masculine things. So I think if that were mainstreamed that's not the only thing that would be healthy for this country or the healthiest thing. But when you divide people politically on the basis of sex, you think that some of the civil wars that we're having in this country are bad? Dividing based on what's between your legs on a political level, that's one of the many civilization killers. As it pertains to the substance of her answers, I was very impressed with her. She was very quick on her feet. She has done, obviously, a lot of research on this. Mm-hmm. But this is akin to, let's say I go down to the creek and I plant a tree. And then I go up out of the creek bed and there's a desert or dry ground in an area that doesn't really get a lot of rainfall. And I plant the same type of tree over there. And I notice as the months and years go by, the tree that I planted in the desert withers away, while the tree that I planted down by the creek grows and flourishes. And I come to the conclusion that, well, it's better to plant that tree down by the creek than it is to plant it up in the desert. And then I start to ask myself, why is that the case? Well, there's no nutrients up there. There's no rainfall up there. And I look at the tree planted down the creek. There's more nutrients. There's more water. I noticed that the tree's root system actually reaches down deeper into the ground where there are more nutrients. And I notice all of these things, all of these factors, and I come to realize that it is better for that tree to be planted down where there's water and nutrients than where there's not. But why? You're still not fundamentally, why is that tree more equipped down by the water than it is up in the desert? And the answer is that that's how it's designed. For all of the statistics, all of the facts, all of the trends, whether they're social or cultural, that she brought to the table here, it's dancing around that little question and that one word, design. Mm-hmm. It's like you saw, this is not a one-to-one comparison, but it's like you saw, I think it was in Texas, women in Texas, because of their anti-baby killing law, They threatened to go on a sex strike. We're reverse engineering. We're reverse engineering the outcome that we're actually advocating for.
So abstinence works?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Or
when they say, fine, no more abortions, then we're not giving sex to men outside of marriage, and you got to pay child support. And we're like,
thank you.
Your terms are acceptable.
Yeah.
Well, your offer, we're good.
Yes.
Sold.
Yes.
You bet.
Yeah, fundamentally, the reason why this is never going to be able, at least not in the modern American left, not going to be, some of the things that she's advocating for are never going to go mainstream in the American left as it's currently constructed, is because they can't answer the question of why.
And many of them don't want to.
Correct.
Because the why gets in the way of the what they want to do. The
Correct.
why does. Okay? Because design implies a what?
A designer.
And therefore a designer denotes accountability.
Correct.
Okay? And most human beings, regardless of their belief system, don't seek out accountability on a regular basis. It's not like very few people have, like in their bios or their obituaries, just loved accountability. Okay? So there's a lot of us, by the way, who agree that there's a designer and have accepted that accountability on a meta level. We are still on a daily basis struggling to accept it on a personal level, right? Mm-hmm. We are even in our thoughts contemplating of how we can rebel against that very same accountability we are acknowledging in our meta, right? And this is why we have to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. I want to make this point very clear because I spent a lot of time last week talking about how we've reversed the two greatest commandments. But I also want to make sure that we do not act as if that second commandment, therefore, is irrelevant. It's still second, man. That's pretty big in the pecking order if you're second, okay? Now, your neighbor's not God, but they do matter quite a bit if they're second, all right? And I wanted to demonstrate to you guys in the audience that I can ask questions from our worldview and be respectful of her, provided she's being respectful, even if we don't necessarily agree with what she's saying. She's not intending to be deceiving to our audience. That's the only time I'll get combative with people when they come on, is if the intent is to get deceptive with the audience. I mean, we did an interview with a guy several months ago who just lost his mind on me about voting for Trump. I never got mad at the guy, never said a word, didn't lose my stack. Everything he said about me had no bearing on what I thought about him on any level whatsoever. The only times you'll ever see me truly go after someone in these kinds of one-on-ones is when I think they are intending to deceive you. That you cannot do. I can think what you believe is not true, but you cannot knowingly say stuff to our audience that you know is not true and try to deceive them. If you do that, then Katie, bar the door, all right? You hear the train coming down the track. Short of that, though, I think, because here's the thing. She probably doesn't understand this, but her conversation, her willingness to even have this conversation at any level is a willingness to essentially have a discussion and a check Todd about the entire premise of her worldview, which is why all the questions I asked were, I didn't ask data questions, premise questions. Well, why? Well, what's intrinsic? What's instinctive? Right? She offered up early in the interview that she noticed right away her boys play differently than the girls. Well, why? Well, why? Right? And that's really the big difference here. The secular right wants to pretend that we're debating government processes, or we're debating which media platform is willing to be more truthful. We're not having any of those debates at all. Those are symptoms of the actual debate, or they're sideshow distractions. The actual debate is the same debate it has always been. Did God really say? That is the heart of the debate. Which then, of course, means we have to answer, is there a God? Is there a designer? Right? And the challenge that I don't believe anything she wrote, I mean, I see it in my own son. I see it in other people's, when I hear from other people about their sons. I mean, what she says about building emotional intimacy and those kinds of things, it is a challenge. No question about that. And they're important. But I don't think anything she asked or brought up at all challenges my worldview at all. No. I think all the stuff she brings up, Todd, challenges hers, actually. That's why at the end I asked her, what are the traits in your own husband that you found attractive?
That was, I thought, the best question. And it's the one that I think was one she had not quite heard yet put that way, because it gets to a fundamental level, things you can't deny. I mean, I thought this conversation was going to go one of three ways. I thought it was going to be farcical, like Matt Walsh, or am I racist? I thought it was going to be along the lines of what you said. She would come in here with a chip on the shoulder, a lot of false premises, and things would go DEFCON, whatever the worst one is.
I think one is the worst, right?
Yeah.
I always get it backwards too. Which end is it? But I think one is the worst.
Or I thought it was going to be something like this, and that her introducing that premise from the beginning, like I used to think with the science, what things were. They were just empty tabula rasa, but the science clearly says that's different. That's just a concession. It was like going back into a time machine. I went to the University of Wisconsin. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. I've had so many feminist conversations with women and with men over the years. But the one thing she wasn't going to do, transgenderism didn't come up once. Like over at Carlisle, when I knew I had to get my kids out of there, it was just clear. The mass psychosis, at least amongst the leadership, was that gender is just made up. It looked like that was going to be exhausting for her to even try. She didn't even want to go there. God, if we can, that's progress, man. If talking with the left is like, yeah, that's dumb, that's a scam, that's a start. We could use that again. So that was fresh, really refreshing.
I mean, your point is so key, because if we have a problem with boys, that means there are actually what?
Boys and girls.
And girls.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we were talking real things, real categories. Okay, and yes, there are differences, and they aren't all the same. You have 2 daughters, I have 4 daughters. They're not all the same. They have, press different buttons, different interest. That's cool, but they're all girls at the end of the day. And yes, when you asked her, you have to respect the fact that not every question is so cleverly devised by you. It's going to work the exact same way. And you did keep coming at the same premise in different ways. And I think the one that did it best was the husband. It made it personal to her. And it makes you think about, this isn't just, I'm now applying everything she's saying about her sons to herself. I'm not, it's not
just biology, it's metaphysical.
And it wasn't just random. It wasn't just a choice. And so, you rarely come across, there's the constructive conversations plant seeds that later on bloom. If you do, yes, wouldn't it be great at the end of this conversation, she would have yes, touch the hem of your garment, Stephen. That's not how these things work. I think that was really well done in terms of just making sure that she wants to go forward and keep mining the path that she's on.
Amen. One last word about preparation. This is what our friends at My Patriot Supply do as well, man. And I finally made the call last week. So I got my 4-week emergency food kit. I got my water filtration system after seeing what is still ongoing in North Carolina, for example. I mean, this is the state of the research triangle. More research dollars are spent in the state of North Carolina than almost per capita any place in America. And that yet they are still struggling to dig out from what nature is capable of. Okay, so make sure that you are ready. 2,000 plus calories per day, up to a 25-year shelf life. All right, you can get the 4-week emergency food kit. That's breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks. All right, and it ships for free. And you'll get a discount when you go to preparewithdace.com. That's the website for My Patriot Supply. Preparewithdace.com is where you want to go. Preparewithdace.com to make sure you've got that peace of mind. I finally bit the bullet, and I'm like, I got to go in. I mean, if this can happen in North Carolina, man, it can happen absolutely anywhere, right? Preparewithdace.com is the website. Preparewithdace.com. All right, we got about 2 minutes. Any final thoughts? Great idea to you, by the way, I should mention. This was a great idea to you, booking this and coming up with this.
Well, like you said, I try more than you think. It's just virtually impossible. There's just people that, no, you're in that category. You're in that silo. You're beneath me, which is... If we keep doing that, it's not just on the gender issue, it's every other issue. And so we have all these false constructs. There's no idea worth having that you won't test it. And this is, you saw Socratic dialogue. This is how things are supposed to work. We would do this all the time.
All the time. You bet. You bet.
We're not the ones who are afraid of it.
Nope.
I don't remember much of that world. I mean, I grew up, I didn't have cable television. I understand what was, Tucker Carlson was on MSNBC, was it? Or was it CNN that he was
MSNBC,
on?
MSNBC. Well, all of them, but he was on MSNBC as well.
Debating,
with Rachel Maddow.
Yes.
And CNN on Crossfire, yeah.
And you just don't get that really much anymore. It's talking past people, discounting people, just completely discounting people because of the basis of X, Y, or Z. So refreshing to say the least today.
Ultimately, if we talk to each other, what we're going to find, well, if we're being intellectually honest, okay, if we're people of integrity, doesn't mean we're going to agree on even anything. But if we have even a modicum of integrity and we're intellectually honest, what we're going to find is we share many of the same fears and concerns in common. The breakdown is going to come on what is the solution. And that's because to get to the right solution, we have to start from the right premise. And that's really the argument we're having here. Okay, we're having a question ultimately of what is the meaning and purpose of human life and who gets to determine that? Or has it already been determined for us? Romans 8:28.